Hello everyone, Zelleranth here, and the Destined banner with Momo and NonoWill has dropped today. And today I'll be kind of going over NonoWill and some of her skills and some of the ideas I've been theory crafting with her for her potential with current units, as well as what potential units you will want to pull in the future if you are to acquire her. She is the one that I would say be my favorite one on the banner. She has a lot of use. And I found there is a skill that it doesn't look like any future units currently have the capability of easily applying this debuff onto enemies in the future. Now, like a lot of other Vilder units, she has infection built into her kit, but what I've found is there's some other things in her kit that I think I would make my primary focus with what she would use. So when I kind of pull up here on Loot and Waifu's website, he has all of the skill breakdown on here. When you look at her passive skill that she just comes with the default, she possesses jump, which is good. She has the maneuverability. So if you think like Cole, if anybody has gotten Cole and how he can get around places a lot easier with jump. So she's got a lot of movement, which is what you're going to want with the kind of the build that I'm looking at with her. And then she has Veils, and when she moves, she becomes AoE damage taken is reduced by 99%, and it disappears after being attacked by an AoE attack. So she can avoid 1 AoE damage, which is pretty good. Has a cooldown of 3 turns. If you get her stars, you can reduce it to 1 all the way at 5, and increases her bonus attack at 5. I actually don't think she really, like, her passive is alright, but this isn't what I find to be the key in her skill. I would not, if you have other units that you have high priority stars to get, I would not worry about getting stars on her and investing in that. She comes right out of the gate doing exactly what I wanted her to do. So the big things that I see with her that are quite important would be this skill level 3 one, the Enchanting Shadow. This is an instant where she gains dodge, so that's another way to avoid damage, and inflicts vulnerable 3 on the enemies within this target area of a range of 1 to 2, and lasts for 2 turns on all the enemies within the 2 tiles around her. So if you sleep with the image, all those enemies are going to get vulnerability 3. And what vulnerability 3 does is it increases the damage taken by 30%, which is pretty huge. Now this is the one thing that you don't really see available in any other kits out there, and bringing her in, this can be what separates you from doing enough damage to, so like with the current bosses we're fighting for the weapon trials, it can be the difference between being able to do enough damage and not to be able to complete the last stage. So this would be a must get for me on her kit. The other thing that I would pick would be she has the leadership aura for aggression, and this is one thing that I'm kind of going to build her around if I were to get her, is her being more of a support unit than actually being a true damage dealer like some of her other skills give. So she would have that one for putting a vulnerability on it. Then you'd have the aura for aggression units to increase their by default the attack by 10% and defense by 20%, but then also skill damage by 10%. So that on top of the vulnerability is already adding more and more damage there. And then another big one is on her level, skill level 11. This would be the third one that I'd put on her primary kit, which is she gets the Celestial Song aura, and what this does is it grants all allies within 5 tiles Regeneration 2, and it makes them immune to attribute debuff, and that's going to be a big thing with the other character I'm about to discuss here that I think would pair very well with her. And it inflicts active skills on all the enemies within the 3 tiles. That aura lasts for 2 turns, and it cannot be dispelled or immune. Now it lasts for 2 turns, and it has a cooldown of 3. So you can have this up for 2/3 of the time that you're using her. Now, with a unit that I'm pretty much going to say in almost every unit I talk about, if you can get Kakoa in your team, you can reduce your cooldown, and you can pretty much have this up at all times. And that the attribute debuff I find will be extremely useful in preventing a lot of some of the later enemies that will actually start spreading them quite a bit. But then the one unit that I think of that would work really well with her when I'm looking at future units will be a unit called Caris, and she is in the story. I haven't actually done the Popple State story, but she's the head of the Popple States, I believe, or someone high up in the rankings. And she's kind of a mage, similar to Beryl, She's not as strong on the mage aspect. She doesn't do as much damage, but she has the capability to do a lot of damage in her kit. But one thing I've seen in her kit is she has a lot of support type magic abilities as well. I know a lot of us used the one debuffing, I forget what his name is, I think it's Void or something, that comes with the skill that puts 2 level 2 attribute debuffs on the enemy they attack. Well, this is in her kit, so she can do the same thing where she can just put right on the boss or any other enemies. Well, I would not actually make this one of my primary skills. She has it built into her kit. But what she has that I find that is really huge that would be beneficial for not only NonoWill, but another unit that I'll bring up in this discussion will be her having her leadership aura. So she has one that has the same 10% and 20%. But then she has the one where when the target or the ally within her aura has 4 or more buffs, they get a penetration damage increase of 12%, and their damage received is reduced by 12%. And so this is for all Popple State units. Or not Pop, yeah. I think it's, yeah, it's the French Empire, which I think is Popple States on this. But one big thing is one unit that you'll see in that is Beryl's on this list. And the other thing is Beryl's on the list for aggression as well. So if you use Caris alongside NonoWill with both their leadership buffs, they will both apply to Beryl. So you can get that 10% skill increase, as well as get the penetration increase if you have 4 or more buffs on Beryl. And with these kits, you can see how you can accumulate a lot of buffs on her, the way I kind of see how you can build up this team. So she has this really nice skill here too, but you can use her as defensive as well. So alongside that, you can put a shield on all of your teammates. So kind of put a large shield based on her magic attack on your teammates, and she's going to be building up magic attack. And then she has an ultimate where she does a significant amount of damage. It's almost like a meteor. It's a weaker version of Beryl's meteor. But the difference is when it hits, it applies stun to all the enemies for 1 turn. So when it hits, it prevents all the enemies that get hit by it from taking a turn. So while it's not as much damage as Beryl's, it does stun all the enemies around it. And so you can almost use this as a 1-2 tap with Beryl, is kind of the way I'm looking at it. And then she also has this one passive, and this is where I said where it can be useful having NonoWill's aura to prevent debuffs, because when the player, or so when Caris does not have any debuffs, and she has no debuffs and 3 or more buffs, she gets an increased attack of 15% and an increased defense of 30%. So that would be something where preventing the debuffs that NonoWill can bring to her kit. But the big thing is both of them have the leadership auras, and so that's where I would go and start looking at taking into consideration who I would pick as my 3rd character in this team comp that I'm kind of looking at here, which would be Beryl, which we already have, and everybody knows how much damage she's capable of. She being a high magic damage user that can do big damage on AoE, and can do big damage on single target. And so she would actually be the 3rd one that I would kind of want to bring into a team from what I can tell, because she falls under both the aggression and Popple State, so she can get both of their leadership auras. So the way I see you using NonoWill is NonoWill kind of goes in there, puts on some of these, gets this aura to prevent the debuffs hitting them, prevents the enemies from being able to use their skills. She makes sure the teammates are healing up through regeneration too, so you can keep your team pretty healthy through that. Then she can go in here, put a vulnerable 3 on the enemy, which increases damage by 30%. And then if you use her basic attack, which I forgot to mention this, the basic attack I would select would be this one here, where she deals damage to the enemy, and she removes 2 buffs off them. So you can remove buffs if they have defense plus or something like that, or magic defense plus. You can remove those buffs. So not only are you increasing their vulnerability, removing their buffs with NonoWill. Then you have Caris in there kind of coming in, and you can either stun the enemies if you need to in an AoE range, you can buff up your team with shields, you have other forms of debuffing on them, she can heal herself through life drain, lots of AoE type attacks in her kit, so I think she'd go great with her. And then she has the leadership buff, which is, to me, one of the big things, giving penetration damage. And so with that, you can like supercharge the amount of damage your Beryl can do, and then you can have your Beryl doing significant amount of damage. So like on the weapon trials, if you had these whole teams, you'll be not knocking good chunks out of the boss damage. And so those are the primary three you would have in the team. The other person that I would say you would almost always want as well would be Cocoa. But I mean, every team's pretty much going to want her. But I don't think she's as completely necessary on this, because one thing is that Beryl does not have cooldowns in some of her bigger skills. Now, she has energy issues if you don't have anything giving her the extra energy. But she doesn't need the cooldown reduction, but she would like the energy that Cocoa gives. And it's the same thing with Caris. Caris is a very big energy user that wants a lot of energy coming her way. She's actually one where one of her better weapons is the Cornucopia staff from the Battle Pass. So like, you kind of have that fourth unit being Cocoa, or someone else that can generate the energy or cooldown reduction. So another unit, if you don't have Cocoa, that'll come down the line, that'll be another really big, very useful unit will be Tear. And Tear's really good at giving energy to your teammates, as well as having other things built into his kit. He can even be somewhat of a healer for your team. So he'd be another person I'd think about in that kind of team comp. And I'll probably go more in depth than him at a later time, but he's extreme. He's almost on, I'd say he's at the same level as Cocoa. Cocoa is probably what I would consider the most important pull for me on a utility standpoint, and he's looking like he'd be the second most important with his energy generation, as well as other support skills that he applies to the team. And then the fifth slot, you can kind of go with whoever you want. You can take in a dedicated healer like a Nana, if you have a Nana. If you want to really power up, Beryl, you can bring in. She is also in the Sword of Convallaria, so you can bring in Raiwa, if I have her here. Where is she on this list? Oh, there she is. You can bring her in, and then you can have 3 leadership auras affecting her, and if you take hers, she increases, so you got the attack and defense, which those don't stack, but the damage dealt increased by 8% and decreases damage taken by 8%. So I believe the decrease in damage taken does stack. So I believe you get that alongside Caris's, so you can actually make Beryl even a little bit tanky. She'll take significantly less damage from both of their auras, but she's also doing a lot more damage with all the auras. So you could take her, or I mean, you just take whoever you want. It's kind of a flex. The fifth one's kind of a flex slot. But there's also another unit that's actually quite useful that I could see if you didn't want to go the Caris route, and it's a unit that I think a lot of people are going to want to pull. So she has the aura for aggression, and the unit that's coming out that is also in aggression is a Gust. And a Gust I know is like a must pull for a lot of people. But he falls under aggression, so he can get that leadership aura from her, which gives him that 10% skill damage increase. So you can also, instead of going the Caris route, you can also go more of a Union route. So you can bring in NonoWill, and then have a Gust be your main DPS that does the bulk of the damage, and then you can have like supports like Gloria, so then you can get the Union buff from Gloria, you can get the NonoWill buff on the aggression, which will make a Gust your main damage dealer rather than having Beryl be your main damage dealer, and then you can flex the other people. Maybe you bring Simona, so you can have some more utility on controlling the battlefield. It can kind of act as your tank. You can bring Cocoa just for your energy and skill reductions. You can bring a Nana for making sure you have your heals. So you kind of flex on a lot of the other units in that aspect. So overall, I think if it was a debut banner, if this was a debut banner and NonoWill was the only unit on this banner, I would say absolutely pull, at least put some pulls on it for her. She has a lot of utility and is very flexible in some of the teams she can go in, and she works well with a lot of the top tier DPS. I mean, Gus is a really good DPS. Caris is a good DPS. She's very energy intensive and needs a lot of investment to work really well, but she can be top tier with the correct setup. And then she can work with even other setups. I mean, just having that extra vulnerability 3 on this level 3 skill, that's something you really don't see. I don't think there's any units that I could find that had it. And I've seen someone had mentioned in the comments that's one thing with her, that someone in China has her as a T0 simply because of this value here and some of her other capabilities she's allowed to use with it. So if it was a debut banner, I'd say absolutely pull. I don't like the Destiny banners because it has 2 units and you can't really guarantee a specific one that you want. But if you actually like her, I would say you could throw a few multi-pulls at it if you want. But I would definitely want to make sure that you take into consideration that Krakoa is coming up next. And to me, she's probably the most useful in terms of utility that we'll have for a while. She's not, I mean, now we have Sophia and August coming probably right after. But Krakoa to me is even higher priority than them, because DPS, I mean, we have plenty of DPS, and of course I want to get the best. But I want the utility that can support them, and Krakoa can fit in any team, and is extremely valuable to every single one of them. Now when it comes to gear for NonoWill, she's quite flexible on it. One of the big ones that I would think is because you're kind of going in a debuffing route, and Caris has some advantages when the enemies have debuffs on them. And then you can, if you bring someone like Momo with you, you can increase dot damage. So one weapon that I think that would work really well on her would be the Ever-Burning Blade. And I've seen that as being on some of the other kits as their better weapon. But when it comes to this, you can get Scorch on the enemy, especially if you have a 5-star, guaranteeing a Scorch. So it deals 20 more, and then you can deal more damage to anybody that already has Scorch on them. But if you don't have that, there's tons of other good weapons in there. I think the Newborn Blade, just it's not as important. The weapon to me is not as important. That it's just being able to give her some stats and do damage when she does her basic attack. There's nothing too crazy that she really takes advantage of. The bigger one would be when it comes to the trinkets. One that I really like is because I'm kind of, and I like this on almost every unit. If I don't have a trinket that I can think of that I specifically want them to have, this one I have plenty of because it's an epic, and it's probably the best epic of all the trinkets. It's better than a lot of the legendaries. But at 5 stars, you can do this every 2 turns, and it's an instant, and it puts 2 random level 2 debuffs on the enemy. And this has been what has won me the weapon trials at lower levels. So I've been able to beat weapon trial 1, 2, and 3 on the highest difficulty, and this was a big part of it. And you could throw this on pretty much any of your teammates, and you can just throw them on enemies, give them some debuffs. But if you don't have that, or you're already using it on someone else in your team, which you could very well be, you have a bunch of other good trinkets. You have the Flying Blade, which can do some damage, percentage-based piercing damage, just to do a little chunk to an enemy. Another one I really like here is, this is kind of the opposite of the Disaster Bottle. If you have a lot of these, now I don't think a lot of people are going to have a lot of it, but this one can put 2 level 2, put 1 buff, one ally level 2 buff, and it gives them speed for 2 turns, and if you get all at 5 stars, it can be used 5 times with a cooldown of 2. So if you have this, especially if you start stockpiling a lot of this one, I would absolutely put this one on her. Other than that, it's mostly just the utility ones that I'd go for. Everything else really doesn't have anything that I feel is very specific needs to her. Think maybe Roaring Flint. This one's another one that does damage, so it's kind of like the armbands. Just anything that do a little bit of damage, put a little chunk out there. As many people know, half the time there'll be one enemy where you take them to basically a sliver of health, and if you just had one little bit of damage that you could do to finish them off, it'd be nice. And so you can have something like that. She's acting as more of a debuffer going in, trying to avoid attacks, coming out. But overall, I think NonoWill is a great pickup if you get her. It's the only thing is really the timing of this banner and it being a destined banner. It's just not enough value to take the risk on this banner because it can take up to 360 pulls to get her. But if you really want her, you won't feel bad getting her. I actually hope I can get her when I lose a 50-50 down the road. She's kind of on that level. I want to get Dantillion as well if I lose a 50-50. She's another unit that I'll be happy to lose a 50-50 to. And then she's also nice. It's nice in the fact that I don't have to worry about trying to get all... I mean, you'll want to eventually get your units up to 5 stars, but we're going to be constantly getting new ones, and I'm not going to look to... I don't think I'll ever get her up more than 1 star unless I get dupes, and she doesn't really need them, which is great. All the skills and the kind of kit I would build around her don't need any stars. The only thing that you really get is the reduction in the cooldown in the veil, but it's not absolutely necessary. To especially if you use her with Caris, because Caris can put a shield on her anyway, so she can soak up some damage a little bit in that aspect. And that's just some of my thoughts on NonoWill and some kind of team comps that I've been kind of thinking of putting her with. But if anyone else knows of anything that I'm not mentioning here, just go ahead. Don't be afraid to put it in the comments. I've been responding to every comment that I see on all my videos. And I can always I can look to pin stuff at the top if it's something I feel that's relevant. So just put whatever you want in the comments, and thanks for watching.